IVM.
The growth of digital put the entire advertising and marketing industrial complex on a path of accelerated transformation. And the aspect that saw the fastest change was the practice of media planning and buying. And this evolution led to many new age media agencies bringing together the combined forces of media, data, and content to be key drivers of growth for any brand looking to transform itself. And this aspect is more relevant now than ever. So I thought it would be great to get Anand Chakravarthy, the Senior Vice President and Managing Director at Essence, on the show to look at this evolution, as well as look ahead to where this transformation is really headed. I'm Varun, the co-founder and corner chief at The Glitch. We'll be right back with Advertising is Dead.
रिश्ते में तो हम तुम्हारे पॉडकास्ट लगते हैं. नाम है फुटबॉल शुटबॉल.
Presenting Football Should Ball, a show about three friends discussing our favorite game over a beer. Sometimes three, maybe even five. Hi, I'm Shiva, and with me are my two sidekicks, Gaurav Sapre and Karthika here.
Sidekick? You mean like Batman's Robin or Van Persie Robin?
No, I mean like Alexis Sanchez, but with a little more skill than just playing the piano.
Ha! Just shows how the best players at Arsenal are mere bench warmers at United.
Oh, thank you, Ayer. But you're a Fulham supporter, so whenever you say anything to support me, I question my beliefs.
Just like how Griezmann would say, एक बार मैंने जो decision ले लिया, तो मैं अपने आप की भी नहीं सुनता.
Banter aside, we will talk match reports, transfer rumors, top controversies, fantasy football picks, and so much more. So grab a beer and tune in to Football Should Ball every Wednesday on the IVM podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead with Andy. Hey Andy, glad we can finally do this.
Awesome, Varun. Good to be on this podcast, my first podcast. So you're experimenting with a podcast virgin, as I'll call it.
This is the simplest medium of creation I've realized, especially during a lockdown, because all you need is a laptop and a headset, actually. So I think this is the simplest thing to get.
Absolutely. Having spent 7 years in radio, I really have always believed in the power of audio a lot. Yeah. It's unfortunate that we live in a world where audio visual is currently the big thing, but the power of audio you can't take away. It's phenomenal when it's done right.
I totally agree. For us to kind of dive in, I thought we'll start off with in terms of media as a practice. I mean, when I was reading about kind of the history of it, right, there was a point when media, creative, all were parts of the same unit, and at some point became separate, and media agencies kind of came into practice. But if you look at media now versus media, let's say how it was as a practice, even like 5-7 years ago, what's the changes that you've kind of seen?
So I think the most obvious change has obviously been the onset of digital, right? And I think that's been the biggest disruption in media that's happened over the last, exactly the horizon you talked about, 5 to 7 years. Because, look, I think if you look at the initial part of media, there was a time where the only thing you could do was create a print plan. Then you could create a print plan and a TV plan. Then TV started taking center stage while print continued to be strong. And pretty much it was TV and print for a very, very long time. Right? I think for the longest time in the history of India, media plans were fundamentally TV and print. And at that point of time, I think was when you had integrated creative and media agencies working together, because media was very simple at that point of time. The process of executing a plan was super complicated because of the lack of automation and all of that. But the process of planning, etc., was whatever data you had, you used. And I think, and even though radio happened and out of home happened, I think the real evolution and the growth and the acceleration of science in media has happened once when digital has happened and the onset of digital in our lives. And of course, the sophistication of television measurement in the country, right? And that has certainly made television planning, and from what it was to what it is today, it's come a long way. And I think as that started to happen in the media world, where audience fragmentation started becoming a reality, even television started from maybe 13 channels went to 300 channels and now 700 channels. It's become so much more complicated. And then add to this whole explosion of the digital world, I think the audiences that we're talking to have got significantly fragmented across multiple touch points. And I think that's where the world of integrated planning and having to really look at media through a specialized lens, because for 20 years, if you had people who understood TV and print planning, and then suddenly you had this new animal called digital, it required a completely new breed of people to understand that space, right? And therefore, even within agencies, it started becoming complicated where you had a set of people who understand TV and print, and then you had a set of people who are new, the new kids on the block who understood digital. And that specialization has only increased over the years. And I think eventually, much earlier in the life cycle of this happening, the split happened between creative and media. Maybe not because of digital, but because of other reasons. But now, I think the fact that where technology is playing such a big role, how technology is beginning to, I wouldn't say it's not replacing people for sure, but it's certainly taking away tasks that were done by human beings can be done easily by technology. It's allowing you to create far more sophisticated plans than you could even maybe a year or two ago. And I think that's really what's happened, right? A lot more automation, a lot more sophistication, a lot more, let's say, specialization. I think these are the three areas in which media has significantly evolved.
When people talk about advertising, that the traditional point of view was always talk about the creatives, right? Is fed up with the creative agency, the film, this is exactly all those pieces. But like you mentioned, more and more digitals kind of come in. It's become a lot more about data. It's become a lot more about the measurement and seeing and almost optimizing how well that creative does. And in many ways, I think so. Like the whole advent of digital changed media a lot faster than it actually changed creatives in that sense. So you kind of almost have had a head start on where this is going compared to, let's say, most creative agencies in that sense. So if you look at the combination of media, data, and content, right? I mean, I know that's what Essence has always looked at in a way. How does that combination kind of work? How do you guys look at it from that? Because it's not necessarily three different parts of the food chain. They actually need to work together in present day advertising. So how do you see that coming together?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that really attracted me to Essence as an organization is their simple mission. And it's really simple because it just says, how do we make advertising valuable to the world? And I think in that simple line, there's a lot of power, right? Because the truth about advertising and marketing is that while a lot of people complain about ads, but the truth is the same number of people also watch ads when it's relevant to them, right? Yeah. And advertising is essential. People value advertising because they value advertising when it's relevant to them, when it's served to them in a way that's palatable, and it's targeted to them at the right time and moment, right? And I think that's where the Essence thinking is built on, is how do we use data, technology, and platforms to be able to identify the consumers which are relevant to our client and serve them the right communication, because every consumer is not the same, and that is getting more and more sophisticated. And how do you target them at the right moment, at the right time, with the right creative? Now, while maybe 4 to 5 years ago that was still theoretical in nature, I think it has moved significantly where now it's a reality that one can actually execute with. And I think that's how we look at creative content and media, right? Yeah. Creative and content are the starting point of saying something to a consumer. Media helps you. The way we look at media is, how can I help get that message to the consumer at the right time, at the right moment, so that the consumer is really receptive to that message and doesn't switch off, turn away, right? And I think it's as simple or complicated as that. It sounds obviously it sounds easy, but it's not, because technology is also catching up, and every time technology seems to make a leap, consumers also seem to discover something new. This takes their attention away, and we're always playing catch up. In a way, just like medicine, I think, where doctors are always learning, I think in the digital world, you're always learning. Nothing is the same.
How much does, because obviously they're obviously a predominant platforms, right? Look at a Google, look at a Facebook, etc., and they're obviously the predominant platforms to kind of push at least digital out there, and their touch points are increasing. Do you see? I mean, also now this is whole conversation about how Amazon is now the almost a silent one who's been around, and you don't realize how large that entire piece is. How has commerce kind of changed how you look at, just in terms of just outlaying stuff out there?
See, commerce is growing, but I mean, let's be fair. Today, there are about 100 million people who shop online. Okay, so now it's a large number, but there are probably 3.5 times that of people who watch YouTube, and another 2.5, 3 times who watch on Facebook and on other platforms. So, look, I think one cannot deny the impact that commerce is going to have in the years ahead. It's already having, and the significantly larger impact it's going to have on the years ahead in terms of consumer behavior and therefore on media. I think for us in media, it's very simple. We have to chase the consumer where they go. We know from other markets in the West where e-commerce has evolved, whether it's China or it's America, that people eventually start moving directly to the e-commerce platform to begin their journey, right? And therefore, if their journey started with, let's say, advertising on a platform, now if there's intent, they go directly to an e-commerce platform and start searching for what they're looking for. And therefore, advertising has to talk to consumers, again, I say, right time, right place. And therefore, for many categories where the e-commerce journey is becoming the predominant way to buy the category, your advertising and media journey has to be there and has to begin there, right? So while you will advertise elsewhere, but it's obviously increasingly becoming what I would call center of plate for certain categories. For example, let's say mobile phones as a category. Today, the number of mobile phones sold online is a humongous number. Some estimates put it at 40-50% of all mobile phones sold in this country. Right?
Wow.
Now, even if it's, let's say, 20% or 30%, it's a large number for India. And therefore, if you're a mobile phone manufacturer, you can't not have e-commerce as a significantly important line item in your plan. You'll still advertise on TV, you'll advertise on YouTube, Facebook, but you also have to capture all that intent, which is maybe 30 or 40% is coming through an Amazon or a Flipkart. So I think e-commerce, we know that will continue to have a significant impact on behavior and therefore on advertising and media choices.
Do you think also, obviously, a lot of these pieces we've spoken about, right? Be it the data part of it, be it commerce, this term called digital transformation that is now, I think, thrown around in every second conversation in our space, and it means totally different things to different people, right? So if you have to look at obviously the space the entire world is in, where we kind of going, but to your mind, what is digital transformation in terms of what it is, market is? Because I think that everybody has a slightly different angle to it.
Look, I think you're right. Look, I think marketing, advertising, media, we need to have our cool words. Otherwise, how do we stay cool? Okay, so digital transformation is one of those things. But look, I think very simply put is this, right? Today, digital as a platform and medium is impacting consumers' lives. Consumers are adapting it, and they have adapted it in India at a far greater pace than many countries across the world. For example, let's look at digital payment. Right, in the US, still 40 to 50% of payments happen through a plastic card. Right, in India, the amount of millions of people who have transformed their payment process to a digital payment app is phenomenal. So consumers are adopting digital like it's going out of fashion. Firstly, the first stage to my mind of digital transformation, and I won't use the word, is to first have the capabilities within your organization to address this consumer whose habits are changing and becoming more influenced by digital. I think that's a first step. Now, to be able to do that, at the simplest level, you need people who understand digital in your organization, but there's much more to it than that, right? Because if you want to have a more sophisticated, efficient, and effective digital program, then, for example, you need to start thinking about how are you collecting and storing the data that you're getting from your consumers as they interact with your advertising on digital, which is possible in digital, not possible on TV. Therefore comes the need to invest in, let's say, technology that allows you to store, segment, and access your data in a meaningful way every time you're running a marketing program. So that is another leg of, let's say, digital transformation, which becomes more sophisticated. And then the third one is then adding much more sophistication to your entire, let's say, digital ecosystem, which is, let's say, building a tech stack that automatically pulls data from your database. It's able to identify different segments. It's able to then talk to external platforms like a Google, Facebook, etc., and deploy campaigns also directly, right? And this is only from a media lens when we're talking about digital transformation. Then there is the business processes within an organization which need to also consider how do they use digital more and more. For example, in the FMCG world today, and I was attending this call where Sanjeev Mehta was speaking, and I mean, it's phenomenal to see what Unilever is doing and where they're actually equipping every one of their salesperson with, obviously, they have digital tabs. So when they go into a retail outlet, they already have will have or have what is the kind of product mix that retail outlet is buying, right? And therefore, they're able to customize what kind of promos and offers they're going to give to that trading guy. Now, this is a level of digital transformation which is taking the game to the next level. So I don't see digital transformation to my mind. Therefore, there are different levels. It depends on where your organization is. It starts by recognizing that digital is impacting your consumer and your ecosystem, your business ecosystem. First stage is to get people who are capable and get partners who are capable of helping you navigate it. The second is then starting to invest in infrastructure that you need to be able to build, run, and sustain and improve over time a good digital program. One which is about talking to your consumers in meaningful way, and the other which is about enhancing your ability to talk to your partners, your stakeholders more efficiently. And that's where things like automation, etc., come in. So I think there are many dimensions to digital transformation. I think it will always be like that. And as technology evolves, digital transformation will just add more and more dimensions to it, right? That's what's going to happen. Like, for example, in China during the lockdown, auto companies created virtual showrooms, right? And virtual showrooms, they actually sold cars through virtual showrooms. Now, even as China has opened, it's not that there are droves of people running to showrooms, but their car sales have actually seen a growth in car sales. A lot of people are just going to virtual showrooms, experiencing the vehicle, and then taking a call to buy it, especially those who was buying their second or third car. So suddenly, for an auto company for whom a virtual showroom was never part of their plan, it's become part of their digital transformation, if one would call it, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's really that, yeah. And I don't think there's a end to it. There's certainly a beginning, but there will always
Yeah.
be progression and development, right?
Yeah, before we got onto this chat, we were talking about the report that Essence came out with, right? Which is talking about advertising in 2030. And I think some of those points obviously have gotten accelerated to not like wait till 2030 when almost happening right now, like you're saying. But there are also some pieces there about how things are really going to expand, right? So if you look at that report and you look at where things are really going, which are the pieces that are like real growth areas in terms of just like, again, I'm using the word transformation, but in general for the space, for the advertising space, which are the areas which are really changing?
Yeah, so I think potentially four areas that I think are definitely have already started to accelerate and grow. So one is personalization. We are seeing this happen increasingly with organizations who have created the necessary digital ecosystem and marketing programs and are now able to really target consumers with a high degree of sophistication in terms of messaging, timing, context, etc. Right? And I think that is only going to grow not because it's a cool thing to do, but because that's how advertising will work harder for you. Because consumers are not interested in seeing ads that are not relevant to them, and more they're going to switch off. So honestly, it's not a choice. It's about when are you going to do it, and many companies have started doing it.
Interesting that you're saying that. The other day I was talking to someone and they said that till now we were taking all our consumers and breaking them up into, let's say, four to five sets of consumers. Now that's like 16, 20, or we should be able to break it down and then figure creatives to be delivered to all of them, which is a massive number of things to be created. And so if you don't do automation, you're not going to be able to do it.
Absolutely. And therefore the next one is AI, right? Because as a part of being able to personalize at scale, it cannot be done by humans on the fly. And I think that's where we are going to see, and not only going to see, we are already seeing the impact of AI in terms of not just in terms of running digital campaigns, but also increasingly getting into, let's say, creative content, music, movies, TV, etc., and art, right? So I think not just deploying the message, but also creating the message and making it more personalized on the fly is where the second bucket, I think, which is already big and growing even more, is artificial intelligence. And I think, to my mind, right now it sounds like a cool word, but actually it's already a part of our lives in many ways, and it will continue to play a significant role, not just in advertising, but I think in just the progression of mankind. And the third, I think the third area, which I think is growing, and I think it's becoming so big in India, is micro payments, right? And I think we're already seeing that in digital payments, and I think just the adoption of digital payments in India gives me a lot of hope of how this country can shape itself when it comes to monetary transactions in the future. And even more so now, as I go out to buy vegetables or fruits today, almost every single vegetable vendor, fruit vendor has a digital payment option for you. I haven't handled physical cash, whether I walked into a shop or bought something on the roadside from a vegetable vendor. Everything has happened through a digital.
I haven't used cash.
And it seems normal, right? I mean, suddenly nobody has barriers. That guy is not thinking, "Arey, paisa to mere bank mein ja raha." Nobody's thinking that. So I think if there's a silver lining of any kind with this current situation, I think something like digital payments has got a fantastic fillip, and I think micro payments and digital payments will transform the way consumers interact with brands, buy products even more as we go forward, right? So while I said personalization, AI, micropayments, I think the last area I would say is regulation. Now, regulation will have a potentially a negative impact, I think, on maybe the former of personalization and AI, because I think as consumers become more and more aware of their rights when it comes to their personal data, and while in India, of course, the fact is that at different, irrespective of education, standard of living, socio-economic class, I think many people don't recognize the fact that they give away a lot of their data rights when they
they don't really care.
They don't care. Yeah, but I think governments will have to take on that responsibility, and I think and companies themselves will have to self-regulate themselves, and I think that will happen increasingly so. That regulation will be very good from a consumer perspective, and it will also challenge the industry in advertising to find smarter ways, more correct ways to target consumers and still be able to personalize communication to them. So I think it's an interesting scale. On one side, personalization is the need of the hour. On the other hand, regulation is going to make it tougher to personalize at scale. And I think that's where technology is going to be challenged to find a middle path that can allow it to happen within the realms of data privacy laws.
One of the changes also I think is going to be is that traditional is having to change a lot. What was always called, I wouldn't call it analog, as I think television, everybody else has got built digital into how they function. But do you kind of feel that this is going to also change the way, let's say, television networks function on this side of things, or even, let's say, print, etc.? Do you see that happening a lot?
So let's take print for example.
Yeah.
So I think with the case of print, we're already seeing the mass digitization of print. I'm sure that during this last 2 months, you would have received copies of every single newspaper in a PDF form.
On WhatsApp, right?
And magazines are doing the same thing. And interestingly, some brands are even willing to buy advertising on these digital formats, even during this period of time. So I think businesses like print, for example, we've seen the journey already beginning where more and more print is getting digitized, and you have the advent of apps like Daily Hunt, In Shorts, Google News, etc., being kind of starting to become more and more the first port of call for news.
I agree.
And I think that has forced a lot of the publishers to relook at their models and accelerate their own digital presence for their product. If you look at television, on the other hand, I think the first big inflection happened is that firstly we moved from a very analog cable network in India to a digital cable network. And to my mind, that itself was super important because it allowed broadcasters to at least start to offer customers the ability to customize the packs that they were buying on their own. And you can see increasingly if you have whether you have a cable connection or a DTH connection, you have full choice today to choose the channels that you want and pay for. Right?
Yeah.
Now that has created a very different type of business model, and it has also forced the broadcasting industry to pivot in terms of how they generate their money. Of course, advertising is still their main means, but subscription is also now a very critical part of how they generate revenue. But if you look at it on the product side, I think if I look at the most obvious thing which has happened with the broadcasting business is the fact that everybody has launched their own OTT platform, right?
Yeah.
And they have clearly seen the value in being able to give consumers the choice of watching a show on TV or watching it on their mobile phone through an app at any point of time they want, right? And catch-up TV has become a huge habit in this country. It's growing significantly where consumers are watching shows that they missed on TV and catching up on the app. And I think every single broadcaster in this country now has a digital presence which is growing. And now they also have a subscription version of it where they are investing in content, right? So, in a way, straddling traditional broadcasting and this emerging OTT, where a lot of focus is going to be on OTT going forward because that is going to be a big part of the entertainment future for most economies and countries in the world, right? So I think that is definitely happening.
When I look at this entire model of all the OTTs, on one end you have a Netflix, for instance, who obviously doesn't really get into advertising, bring advertising into their app at all, and that's one part of it. And Amazon, who I in my mind it's almost a values added service to Prime users, so it's not necessarily a revenue focus for them at all. But I think for the TV networks, I don't know if it's this mixture of having subscription, but primarily for, let's say, sports or international content, but not necessarily subscription for Indian content. Do you see the way that they even look at how the advertising part of that change? Do you see them looking at, because till now it is very straightforward, right? Either have a pre-roll ad in there or kind of bring in branded content in there. Do you see that evolving and slightly more evolved models coming in?
We're talking about advertising on OTT platforms?
Yeah.
I think it will change. I think most OTT platforms are moving towards what you call a self-service, where they will increasingly allow agencies or client partners to deploy advertising by being able to choose segments, etc., just like you can do in the Google ecosystem on YouTube and you can do in the Amazon. So I think self-service platforms is around the corner with some of the OTT players for sure. Now, if you look at in how you can advertise on OTT, actually most OTT platforms today offer all formats except on live events. They offer almost all formats that you get on any digital video platform today. So, bumper ads, 30-second, long format, etc. So, from an advertising ecosystem, OTT platforms are now, in terms of what they offer, are pretty much on the same that any other digital platform like a YouTube or Facebook used to offer or offers now. I think the second thing that they're going to be able to add is things like what we call is the good old AFP model, okay, which is a different way of generating revenue because your brands are still interested in creating content properties that they can own. Now, creating a content property on a TV channel today is not a simple thing to do. It's very expensive, very expensive, right? And lots of challenges there. But on an OTT platform, the ability to create a branded content piece or a brand or a AFP, which is a long format or a mid format but a long standing property, is really, really possible and doable, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that happening with OTT platforms where brands are starting to create their own branded content mini-series and host it on OTT platforms. That's another new revenue stream for the OTT platform, and it's a new marketing avenue for brands.
Yeah, because the amount of content we are consuming now, and I think this is going to be something which you're going to do more and more, right? It's not like we were consuming any lesser before, everybody went into lockdown, but I think now it's such an integral part of our day, and you're kind of snacking in and snacking out, but also continuously watching stuff. It is something that's really going to be a focus point, at least in my mind, from what I've seen where brands will look at.
No question about it. I think, see, we've talked about content for many years now, okay? Yeah. And many brands are dabbling in content. The truth is that everybody's trying to do their content pieces. I think the challenge is that a lot of times, I think marketers also, equate a content piece with an advertising piece and look at ROI like that.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works. Right?
Balance entertainment and brand. Right?
Yeah, and not only from the creative perspective, even from the ROI perspective. So just because I launch a branded content piece there, if I think that, okay, I get 5 million views, and then I'm saying that, oh, what if I spend the same money on my 30-second commercial? I would get 15 million views. So isn't that better?
Yeah.
Now, I think the kind of...
It's not the same.
Not the same, because the kind of engagement you can create through a branded content piece, the kind of brand love you can create to a branded content piece is often far more superior than what you can do with an ad. And it has its place in the marketing mix, and the two should not be confused for a replacement of each other. All right. I think that's where the debate typically happens about, what is branded content going to do for the business? versus, advertising has always given me high return on investment. So why should I invest in branded content except to just tick a box or, get awards? And I think I'm still seeing very few brands for whom branded content is like a big strategic lever and a part of the like center of the plate when it comes to marketing.
Yeah. In the beginning, you spoke about how you were at radio at a certain point of time.
Yeah.
Where do you see audio kind of going in this mix? Are you seeing interest in audio as almost like because a platform for audio is always a radio thing, right? Let's have a radio part of our
Jingle.
marketing budget. But in general now with, let's say, like what we're doing, like be it a podcast, be it audio platforms per se, is that something which brands are looking at a lot more, or do you see that scaling up a lot?
So to be fair, I don't know whether brands are looking at it a lot more, but I definitely see consumers starting to look at it a lot more. It's happening at the top of the pyramid, okay, where people who are getting tired of too much of audiovisual, and the fact that also audiovisual content after a point of time doesn't necessarily have all the depth you're looking for. Whereas, for example, if you look at podcasts, and on any decent podcast platform, you can get content that you would possibly never get an audiovisual version of. Right. And I think for people who are looking for that kind of diversity and depth and richness in terms of what they consume, podcasts offers a lot more in terms of, let's say, width and depth of content. But the fact, and I think it's picking up. Look, the fact that you've done 77 episodes shows that you have an audience out there who are willing to tune in to a podcast and listen to quality content as long as it's quality content, right? But I think it will take some time for it to get scale where it starts becoming an exciting medium for advertisers. So I think
also the numbers are small.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. When I say scale, I mean that for advertisers to put money behind podcasts, the question that will always start off with how many people are listening versus who is listening. I think for many brands, if you focus on the who is listening, you will see a lot more value in investing in podcasts even now, irrespective of numbers, because this is an audience you possibly will not get anywhere else.
Just to kind of like take a slight pivot from this, is this the stream you want to get into when you started off in your career? What was?
No way, man! I've stumbled through my career for many years. Trust me, I still don't know. I still don't know what I want to do. Okay, so
what did you want to do when you started off?
So look, I started life as a mechanical engineer.
Same here.
Followed in my dad's footsteps. My dad was an automobile engineer in the automotive industry for his entire career. And in my mind, I don't know whether it was my mind or his mind, but okay, engineering was definitely not medicine. And I know at least back in my time when I was in 11th standard, it was either you become a doctor or engineer, or you can leave the home. Kind of. So unfortunately, cursed with being the youngest cousin and a family full of engineers, I guess I decided to do engineering. So I did 4 years of mechanical engineering. By the end of the first year and a half, I knew that I was doing something that I don't want to do for the rest of my life. I got out of engineering. I worked in a
Don't you feel that engineering does that to you? If you're not, it makes you very quickly realize that you don't want to do it.
I think actually in life there are a lot of things that almost everything in life. If there's something that you don't want to do, your mind says you can't do this. You know very quickly that shit, this is not what I want to do, right? And I think engineering was one of those things. By the time I was in the second year studying thermodynamics and heat transfer, and I was wondering, what am I doing looking at these archaic boiler rooms we used to have in College of Engineering, Pune, built during the British era. And I'm wondering, okay, what is it? What am I going to learn here that's going to help me?
I failed mechanical engineering design 4 times. So that is my nightmare. 4 times mechanical engineering design. So
So the best part about engineering, I made some of my best pals for life. And my first stint of living in hostel, it taught me to be super independent and live on a non-existent budget. And lastly, it also taught me to eat everything that you get on a plate because you never know when your next meal is coming. So, I lost all my bad habits of trying to be finicky about food, etc. It all went away. That to my mind was the best part of engineering. And then I did my MBA, and then by the time I finished my MBA, I was very clear I want to get into marketing. When I got out of MBA, I started my career with Kanta in research for 2 years. Then I moved to advertising in law, in strategic planning for 5 years. Then I moved to Reliance Broadcast, which was Anil Ambani's entertainment company, which was into television, radio, etc. Spent 7 years there. And
did I ever tell you that we actually, as Glitch, had done a project for you when you were at Reliance?
You did.
And we did a terrible job at it. You had to present an AV and we did a terrible job of it. I still remember that. I was like,
yeah, that's true. So that was me in the marketing role, and then finally moving to a business role within Reliance Broadcast in the television business, and then moved to media. So I joined media very late in my career, 2014. Yeah. So honestly, for me, a jack of all trades, master of none is the way I label myself. But I don't regret any of the choices because I think every single stint, has given me a perspective of that part of the marketing cycle, which helps me today, whether it is research, whether it was advertising, whether it was being a marketing head myself. And now, on the media side, I think it's come together nicely for me, and that I think it gives me a better perspective of how to look at marketing problems versus only seeing it through the lens of, let's say, media or advertising or research.
So let's say, because a large part of the audience of this podcast is young, right? And they're obviously going to get out of college, just starting new jobs. And a lot of them say, no, I really want to work in advertising and media planning, etc. So a lot of them are very set in saying, this is what I know I want to do. And my response to them has always been, you might believe you know what you want to do. You have no idea what will happen. What would you kind of tell them? Like, if they're interested in this space, what should they kind of focus on?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important to recognize that, don't look at digital and say, wow, digital, it's the future, I must get into digital. Be clear about what aspect of digital you want to get into, because the media planning part of digital is very different from the technology part of technology part of digital is very different from, let's say, the product development part of digital is very different, right? And digital itself is a very broad term encompassing many, many things. Now, let's say if you're interested in media, and say you're interested in how can I use digital to help brands sell their products very simply. And if that interests you, of how can I use digital smartly, how can I use first party data strategy, how can I use knowledge about consumers to serve them smart advertising. Media, obviously a career in media is definitely an interesting opportunity, and it's only going to get more and more interesting as more and more technology comes into our lives in the media industry, especially on the agency side. So I think what you need to definitely do is, especially those guys who are studying, is look for genuinely good internships with media agencies in their digital teams or with digital agencies, right? Get exposed to it. I remember the mistakes I made during my MBA was I just did some projects for the sake of doing them without any end goal. We just had to submit projects, so every quarter we used to do something. And I said, I stumbled through my damn career. I never thought about it. But I think I see kids today are much more focused. A lot of the interns that we get at Essence are young people who are exploring digital and working in a digital agency as a part of their future. And they're pretty clear about it. A lot of them come, they work with us, and then some of them do recognize that maybe agency side is not what I want to do. I actually want to do marketing, and in marketing I want to understand digital. So I think to get a better sense, look for internships with agencies. I think that's a great starting point, because there's nothing like getting thrown into the deep end of the pool and experiencing what it means to work on a media plan in the digital side, and that will give you a flavor of whether it's your cup of tea or not, right? And definitely I think those opportunities are widely available, and you should, as students or young professionals, it's the right thing to do. You have the choice of being able to experience something before you decide to dedicate a part of your life to it. You should experience it first, right? And I don't think you should plan too much, because I think for anybody who is 18, 19, 20, 21, over the next 8 to 9 years, the world is going to transform significantly. So even if you decide, I want to be a programmatic digital specialist, the nature of what programmatic digital is today may be completely different by the time you get to a certain stage in your career. So you will also have to be ready to continuously learn and upskill yourself. Just like medical practitioners do in digital, we are constantly training our teams because every time there's a new product, a new version, you've got to retool everybody in the organization. Yeah.
Towards the end of every episode, I do this small segment I like to call the humans of advertising.
Yeah.
Where I ask you really random questions.
Sure.
Many of them are repeated random questions every episode, but I still ask them anyway. What is that? What are you a consumer of, or what are you like let's say, consuming that people who normally would meet you wouldn't assume that you are a huge consumer of? What is your useless information?
My useless information is I watch a lot of TikTok challenges. I just find it fascinating to watch young kids across India from every strata of society, all participating in the same challenge with the same amount of passion, excitement, and amazing creativity. It's phenomenal.
I find TikTok to be a black hole to get into, because once you start going through it, you realize it's 2 hours.
Very true. Absolutely, you're right. It's like a time loss machine.
Yeah,
you don't know the time.
What can you put together in an instant?
Man, what can I put together in an instant? Grilled cheese sandwich. That's it.
Perfect. Anything which you've read or consumed in any format in the recent past which you think people would you recommend?
Well, look, I'm a massive OTT content consumer. So I love 2 shows that I watched. One was Patal Lok and the other was Asur. I thought these were phenomenal pieces of content. And I think both these pieces of content actually, to my mind, at least in my eyes, have elevated my perception of storytelling in India. I think in both these cases, the writers, the directors, I think they really exceeded themselves and my expectations of what to expect from an OTT show. I thought really phenomenal pieces of content.
I've been meaning to watch Patal Lok. Everyone's been talking about it. I've spent my time watching The Last Dance right now.
Oh, I know. That's on my list next.
That is phenomenal. It's such a phenomenal series. I was like, just finished that. So I'm like, now Patal Lok now. This is the next one on the list.
Yeah, I thought fantastic pieces of content. Yeah.
And why will advertising not die?
Look, because consumerism is going nowhere. Consumers will always want something or the other. And because they want something or the other, there will be multiple businesses who will try to provide them with that. And therefore, the need to advertise your product versus another's will always exist because the consumer want is never going to die. I think COVID, no COVID, pandemic, no pandemic. The fact is that I think humans are on a path of maybe self-destruction or whatever philosophically one can say. But I think the need to consume and the need to want is only going to grow. And therefore, the need for advertising is not going anywhere.
Perfect. It's a great place to kind of end this off. Thanks so much, Andy. Yeah. Thanks for this. This is fun.
Wonderful, Varun. Good doing this. Take care and stay safe.
Stay safe.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed that show. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. Do definitely check out our social media accounts. We've been doing some really cool stuff over there. There are a bunch of recommendations from hosts. I think you'll really enjoy the content that we're putting out there. And make sure you don't miss your favorite shows. Cyrus has been putting out some great stuff, as is the Prakriti podcast, all about policy. Has been doing some really, really fun stuff. The guys at Football Shitball and Football Twaddle are continuing to release episodes as well, which are really interesting. Paisa Anupam's been having guest after guest, just killing it. Puliabazi's been doing so well. Postcards from Nowhere. All these shows are really, really doing well. And really, really putting out great stuff. Appreciate the efforts that the hosts are putting in the lockdown. And thanks for listening, and we hope to catch you again next week.
This is the amazing story of something awesome. Once, Chuck decided to start a podcast. And so he did. The end. Okay, that is a crappy story. But I've got some really cool stories over at my new show, The Origin of Things. On this podcast, I look at the stories of how brands came into being and sometimes evolved out of quite unexpected circumstances. And to make it really fun, I reveal the name of the brand and sometimes a category only at the very end. The show is 5 to 7 minutes per episode and perfect for trivia junkies and brand nerds, especially those with short attention spans. New episodes out every Wednesday on IVM Podcasts app or website, or any podcast app or site that you happen to prefer. End of story, they lived happily ever after.